So I'm going to be sort of talking through, as Miriam said, our report that we've written, which is called We Charge Genocide, Police Violence Against Chicago's Youth of Color. And I'm going to start off by giving a little bit more context to our work, right? So I'm going to explain why we charge genocide, and then I'm going to explain this process of the UN that we're engaging, because it's kind of complicated, and then I'll actually get into the report and explaining the key highlights and things that we've discovered, and then going through our demands that we're making towards the UN. So this summer, back in May, there was a young man named Damo who was killed by the CPD. I'm going to start off with a quote from a young person who knew him named Ethan, who was friends with him. And this is a quote that Ethan shared with us at a hearing that we held back in August. And he wrote a poem in response to his friend's death. And in the introduction to this poem, this is what he said. So the piece I'm going to share, I started when I heard about my friend. When my friend Dominique Franklin, also known as Damo, died from the police. He was tased about 3 months ago, and then after a couple of days in the hospital, he passed away. He was killed for stealing a bottle of liquor from a Walgreens or something, and for a while, I couldn't write about it. I started a piece and I put it down, and then just a couple days ago, a couple of my friends were arrested by police, and in the process, some of the cops pulled their guns on us. And I thought if one of us was killed right there, the same process would just keep happening. And I really got the sense of like disempowerment. The same sense I get when I saw Damo in the hospital bed, or saw him in the casket, and I knew there was nothing we could do. So throughout this, I'm going to be reading a lot of really powerful testimonies from young people of color that have been shared with us, and I never really know what to say after them. I think they're extremely moving and full of a lot of complicated truths and important information for us. One thing I want to add to Ethan's testimony here is that when Damo was tased, he was already in handcuffs. And he was tased 3 times, and he hit his head onto a metal pole, which put him into the coma when he died. So Damo dies, and Miriam Cabo, who you all just met, if you didn't know her already, actually held a circle because Damo was connected to a lot of young organizers in the city, a lot of young people in the city who have been organizing around police violence, for a lot of their lives and resisting police violence for a lot of their lives. And Damo was connected to specifically, I believe, the Circles and Ciphers program based up in Rogers Park. And so at this circle, Miriam saw this sense, right, of disempowerment, of feeling like young people just felt like there was nothing that could be done, and saw this need for some kind of container that young people could plug into to feel like they had an outlet, some means towards addressing the injustices that they're experiencing. And Miriam put out a call to help make that project, that effort happen, and that's We Charge Genocide. So we've only been around since that first meeting, I believe, was back in June. So from that initial meeting, what we've grown into is a grassroots intergenerational effort to center the voices and experiences of young people who are most targeted by police violence, by the young people of color who are most targeted by police violence. And so again, we're started to offer this vehicle for organizing and social transformation. And our name is really important. We always get asked, what about our name? So the name actually is really historical, and we're sort of invoking this really rich legacy. So in 1951, the Civil Rights Congress actually wrote a petition to the UN called We Charge Genocide. And this petition documented 153 racial killings of Black people, mostly by law enforcement officers. And this petition, it was something like 200 pages. It's extremely important in understanding the history of the civil rights struggle. And what happens is you have all these folks who sign on to this. You have, I believe, Paul Robeson isn't allowed to actually go and help to deliver it to the UN, so he gives a presentation in New York City. While William Patterson goes to Paris to meet with UN members. When he arrives in Paris, all of the petitions that he had copied out are missing from his suitcase. Luckily, he'd expected this and mailed himself several copies and was able to distribute them to folks. The US intervenes still even more and actually gets the original petition off of the UN agenda, so there's no record at the UN of ever receiving this petition. However, Patterson's out there, he met with folks, he distributed it to all these leaders, and it creates this international hype of folks being like, what is going on in the US? What are you doing to your people, right? And folks are able, because there's organized movement on the ground back in the United States, they're able to leverage that and actually start to see some real deeper relationships between the civil rights struggle and getting some of the policies passed that we then see, right, really taking off in the 60s. So one of the quotes that I think is really powerful from this original petition I want to share now, and it says, "Once the classic method of lynching was the rope. Now it is the policeman's bullet. To many in America, the police are the government, certainly its most visible representative. We submit that the evidence suggests that the killing of Negroes has become police policy in the United States, and that police policy is the most practical expression of government policy. So I think this is really important to understand, right, to contextualize our work. This isn't new, right? People have been fighting against police violence for a really long time. People have always been resisting, right? And that we can learn from that struggle, right? We can learn from some of the tactics that they've used, the things that they've learned to help support our current efforts. And so the experiences that they had with the UN are something that we're learning from, but also adding to this conversation around police violence. This is a really long struggle that we're up against. So bringing it back to our current work in We Charge Genocide. So we really, to resist police violence, we really rely on two primary strategies, education and documentation. So both of these are really, really central. And the first one I want to talk through real quick is education. So we're hoping to really equip Chicagoans with the resources, the tools, and the information to more proactively be able to police the police. So some of the ways that we've been doing this, and you'll have a chance to talk to the other delegation members later who have more experience with this aspect of our work, but we've been doing a lot of Know Your Rights and Cop Watch training. So I think so far it's reached over 160 people. And again, we've only been around since June. So really, really phenomenal work there. So we've got Cop Watch, Know Your Rights. We also have launched a subgroup of folks who are doing research into the militarization of the CPD and trying to make public information that the CPD's been hiding and secure the other information that we don't yet have access to make that public as well. We've had panels. We have an incredible social media team that's trying to bring more and more awareness to this issue of what's going on in Chicago. We also have documentation. So here we're really trying to encourage young people of color to share their stories with us. And we've had a bunch of different ways that a bunch of different mediums that we've provided for folks to do this. The first was back in August. We actually had a hearing at Roosevelt University where we invited several young people of color who have experienced police violence to come and share their stories. And we had a bunch of folks there to just listen. And there was also, at this event, there was a private documentation room where folks could share their story privately and anonymously. And we were able to collect lots and lots of stories at that event. And then another thing that we've done is we've actually taken this really incredible tool that was developed by the Young Women's Empowerment Project called the Bat and Counter Line. I think I saw Shira here earlier, who was behind that. And she offered that to We Charge Genocide to adapt and use as our own. And so this is a tool online that folks can submit anonymously. We have some incredible tech people who have made it so it's super secure and things that I don't understand, but really, really cool. And we've been able to collect more stories from people throughout Chicago. And then through our hashtag #ShyCopWatch, folks have been sharing with us, I'm at this intersection and I see this thing going on. So lots and lots and lots of stories coming into us. The other thing then is that we've been using these stories to help us write this report that I'm going to be talking us through. And the UN report is another effort towards this documentation. And as Mariam said earlier, we know that there is this long tradition of documenting human rights violations. But as far as we know, this is the first youth of color-led one, which is really important.